When you work in the maternity unit of a hospital, you see lots of people come and go: newly born babies, parents that are excited to be giving birth soon, first-time mothers that are nervous about the delivery process, experienced mothers who are glad to be adding another child to their brood, and attentive fathers who are ready to help in whatever way they can. So when one woman came in ready to give birth, no one thought anything of it. It was just another day, another customer. The woman had come in alone, and she looked fairly nervous. There were no records of her at the hospital, and the staff seemed a little confused as to who she was and why she had chosen that specific clinic to give birth. All they knew was that she was a white woman who was around 9 months pregnant and ready to pop. Perhaps she was a little apprehensive, as this was the first time she would be giving birth. When the staff tried to talk to her, she didn't seem very chatty. She would answer their questions in the fewest amount of words possible and seemed to want to be anywhere but there. Eventually, though, the mystery woman started to go into labor. The team gathered around her and prepared her for the birthing process. When she asked for gas and air to help numb the pain a little, the hospital staff dutifully provided her with it and got to work actually delivering the child. The mystery woman pushed hard, and millimeter by millimeter, the head started to emerge. But as it did, the staff seemed a little uneasy. There was clearly something very unusual and shocking about what was happening. The baby was eventually born, a little boy. He was healthy and strong, and there was nothing that caused the hospital staff any kind of concern. But there was one glaring issue that left many people scratching their heads: the mother was white, but the baby was black. His skin tone couldn't have been any further away from that of his mother's. The truth was that the mother had cheated on her husband and found herself pregnant with a black man's baby. Her husband thought the child was his, so the whole pregnancy had been a massive stress for the mystery woman. But she had a plan. It wasn't a good plan or a moral plan, but it was a plan. That night, only several hours after the birth, she snuck out of the hospital bed and disappeared without a trace, leaving the little black baby behind. She would tell her husband the child had died during birth, and she would never be seen again. The next morning came, and as more staff started to pile onto the ward, they noticed that something was wrong. The mother of the black baby was nowhere to be found. They searched the ward for her and expanded their search to the rest of the hospital, but still had no luck. She had even managed to avoid most of the security cameras. She had completely abandoned her baby, disappearing without a trace. But that wasn't the end of the drama. You see, the baby's health had started to deteriorate. Despite him being healthy and well at birth, it turned out that he was having issues breathing and, as such, wasn't getting enough oxygen. The nurses rushed the baby boy to intensive care, where doctors worked hard to stabilize him and assist him with his breathing. It was touch and go for a while, and no one expected the poor child to survive. But as if by some miracle, he started to pull through and make a recovery. It was a happy turn of events for a baby who had been through so much already in his short life. Once he was stable after those few rocky and stressful days, he was returned to the maternity ward. But the boy wasn't out of the woods yet medically. He was back to full health, but now there was the question of what would happen to him next. He had no home to go to, no mother who wanted him, and the staff was quite frankly at a loss as to what to do. They couldn't let him stay there indefinitely. There were other babies that needed that bed far more urgently. Now, they decided to transfer him to a cot in the low-priority section of the ward. The hospital contacted social services and started to consider their options. He could go to an orphanage, where he would grow up and eventually be adopted. This wasn't ideal, as an orphanage is not the best place for any child to be. He could be fostered out to a family that he may get attached to before they too would pass him on again. Not an ideal solution, but their options were very slim. In the meantime, the nurses looked after him and provided him with pretty much everything that a mother should give him. They talked to him, played with him, fed him, checked up on him, and generally babysat the little boy until they figured out their next steps. A couple of nurses even stayed overnight with him to provide him with a sense of not being alone. He may have been young, but they were afraid he could still understand that he didn't belong on some basic level. But there was one nurse who was more attentive than all of the others. She would go out of her way to help the little boy and spend her breaks and free time with him, helping him out or even just chatting with him. The nurse would even come in on her days off just to see the little boy. She loved his big dark eyes, his wide toothless smile, and his playful attitude. She was the one that the little boy started to look at as a kind of mother figure, laughing and smiling whenever she entered the room and crying whenever she left. If the other members of the staff were having troubles with the boy or he wouldn't settle or feed, they would shout for this one particular nurse, who would come running to help. It was as if she were a baby whisperer, being able to take care of him and provide him with everything he needed. The nurse started to really take a shine to the little boy. One day, as she tended to him and fed him, she started to daydream, imagining her life with him, raising him as her son and giving him the fair shot in life that he really deserved. Shaking her head, she knew it was nothing but a dream and that her husband would not feel the same way about things. She was also afraid he would disagree because of the color of the baby's skin. But she was in for the shock of her life when she recounted the whole long and tragic tale to her husband. You see, he too wanted to look after the little boy she had fallen in love with, and maybe even adopt him. They had never been able to have children of their own, despite both of them wanting to. They had tried and tried again, but she had never found herself pregnant. It was almost cruel that she worked on a maternity ward and saw pregnant women all the time. She often looked at them and longed to be in their position, of finally being able to become a mother. Well, now she had that opportunity. The nurse was over the moon, and she and her husband started the adoption process. It took several long months, and it could have all been completely derailed if the baby's real mother had returned. But as everyone had predicted, they never saw the woman again. And so, once all the T's were crossed and the I's dotted, the baby legally became the nurse's and her husband's. They named the beautiful little black boy Mark and raised him as best as they could. When he was old enough to understand, they explained his story to him. There was no use in lying to Mark, and they wanted him to know why he looked different from them and where he came from. It was the right thing to do. Thankfully, he grew into a strong, loving, and helpful young man who, thanks to the nurse and her husband, finally had the acceptance in life that his biological mother would never have given him. So now it's over to you. What did you think of this incredible story? How would you have reacted if you had found a poor abandoned baby boy? As always, we love to hear from you, so be sure to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below.